4 baby turtles.
Hello friends, and welcome to my channel for another custom figure video. I'm very excited about this one. Today we're gonna make a custom soft good mixed material 1/12 scale Ninja Turtle. This is probably the most ambitious figure I've ever attempted, and I don't think anything like this has ever been done before, so I'm really excited to try it out. Without further ado, let's get to it. So this is kind of a full circle thing for me because I started customizing when the NECA movie 1990 Turtles were announced. I had these Playmates movie ones, and they were not very good. Like, they're kind of cartoony in proportions, and the heads were cartoony. I was like, man, I really want turtles that look realistic. So I set out to sculpt heads to put on these that were modeled after the movie ones, because I was so impatient for the NECA ones. I didn't know if I'd be able to get them. That got me to dive headfirst into customizing. So this is kind of a nice full circle thing for me, because when the Mezco versions were announced, I was excited, and then when I saw them, I think they're fantastic, but they're not what I personally want. $400 for the set was just disproportionate to how much I liked them. So I thought, you know what? Let me make some turtles, right? Or at least one. So then I started looking, because I was like, well, I don't want to have to sculpt a shell. I mean, that's like a hard thing to do. And the ones that exist are all molded plastic that are part of a whole turtle thing. I don't want to do that. I wanted something unique. So I started looking around online, and I found this 4-pack you can get. Now these are like these rubbery stretchy turtles inside these plastic shells, right? This is a 4-pack from Amazon that you can get for like, I think they were like $10 or $15 for the set. I landed on what I think is the shell combination that I want to use, using just a body that I got that was like fodder. So from there I was like, okay, I need limbs that are more turtle-esque. And I was looking around at figures, and this guy from Power Rangers, I can't remember his name, we'll call him Pig Dude. He has these limbs that are more animalistic, and they get wider as they go down. And that's what I wanted from the turtles that I'm gonna make. I thought, okay, these are good, and they have like a texture to them. Almost has like a scaly quality to it with these wrinkles. I want these to be seamless, and I don't want to have paint rub. And I know they'll have like elbow pads generally on the turtles, but I still wanted to take it a step further. So I thought, okay, what if I got a green spandex bodysuit? I stretch it over that, and that's what I ended up with. So you still see some of the texture through it, right? Now, I still don't want it to look like fabric. So I got some of this Angelus leather paint. Now, you've seen me use this on the channel if you watch my channel. This avocado is the perfect color. And when you paint this stuff onto fabric, it gets a more like leathery look to it. So the plan is to paint over this, and that will hopefully still retain some of this texture, and then I can just make it look more like, you know, reptile skin basically by using this. Now I'll mix other colors as well, some browns and some yellows for different shades and scales on it and that kind of thing, but that's the plan. So when I say no one's ever done this before, I've never seen anyone basically make a skin out of using fabric over molded plastic and then painting it with this stuff. Now, to take it one step further, as I was messing with these, I realized that this stretchy stuff, you know, that the turtle's made out of is hollow. So with this one, I cut the head off, cut the legs off. You can stretch this over the figure, and you've got your turtleneck, and you're also hiding the joints. So that's gonna tie it all together really well. And then I'm gonna mount the shell to both sides. And then as far as the head goes, I'm gonna have to sculpt something, which I'm really excited about. I want to have a very unique turtle. So I'm going to use a head as a base just to get something on the socket. I'm just going to sculpt a turtle head onto it. Now I want to do something that's a little bit more animalistic, you know, not quite like a real turtle, because then that always looks too weird. I think when you try to make a Ninja Turtle just look like a real turtle, but I want it to have a little bit more of, you know, like a turtle-like features instead of just a smooth round head. I was looking around online for some examples, and you know, of just kind of like maybe other realistic style turtles that people have done, and I found these are from a prop shop called Figment Foundry, and they showed these off at Monsterpalooza some years ago, and they have this whole incredible elaborate sewer setup with all 4 turtles doing different things and a splinter, and they're just absolutely incredible. So big shout out to them at Figment Foundry. I want to try to do something along these lines. I'm going to put my own spin on this, but this is very much within the spirit of the kind of like turtle head that I want to see on this. And to sculpt the turtle head, I'm using this Aves epoxy sculpt. It's a 2-part compound you mix together, and you got about an hour before it starts to get too hard to work with. So the nice thing is you don't have to bake this or cure it or anything. It just air dries and then it's hard as a rock. And for the belt, I'm going to be using this brown pleather material that I have that I've used on some other builds. Everything you can find on Amazon, I'll have links to. A few other supplies will probably pop up along the way, and I'll make sure to mention what they are. That's the plan, and you know, I really don't know if this is going to work. I've never tried anything this ambitious before. A couple months ago, I played with it all, and I got it to a place where I was like, okay, I think this will work. So what you're seeing now is sort of me taking those ideas and actually trying to make it happen. So let's get to it. Okay, I got the body basically ready. So this has some pivot because of the ball joint, and then it also has the hinge. So this does allow for basically butterfly articulation, but just without that extra piece of plastic. I did have to drill into the body, the torso, and then I used some hot glue to help anchor the ball pin in there. You can see I dremeled these down a bit. They just kind of swung out too far. They were too rounded, so shaved them down, and then I actually kind of used the Dremel to sort of recreate some of the texture a little bit, not precisely, but just enough to where it's not smooth there. That shows you the articulation that this guy has. Now, obviously, it'll be somewhat limited by the shell. And I think people, it's really funny, like, when people are like, oh, that Ninja Turtle doesn't have ab crunch. Like, it's a turtle, dude. Like, I don't really know what you're expecting out of something that has a rigid shell on both sides of its torso. Anyway, so from here, I'm going to put the clothing on and get it painted. Once that is done, I can put basically this like turtle suit over it. Okay, so we're in the thick of the mid-project mess here, but wanted to show you some progress. So I've got the soft goods with some paint on them. Now the pattern is showing through, like just the weave of the fabric. I don't know that I'm gonna be able to paint over it. I thought if I painted thick enough on top of it that you wouldn't be able to see that weave, but it's still there. Now, you know, given that they are scaled creatures, you know, it kind of fits in with that a bit, so I'm not too worried about it. And I'm also going to add larger scales that are just like blobs of paint, and that will help cover a lot of it. And then, of course, you know, he'll probably have like forearm wraps all the way up to his elbows. I don't think I'm going to do the pads on these because the articulation on this already isn't great just by nature of these arms. And in retrospect, I probably should have carved out a bit to try to make them move more, but they're all also hindered a bit by how tight the fabric is. So but again, you know, it's a turtle, so I'm not expecting it to have the same amount of articulation as like a man. So this onesie thing worked out pretty well. I wish these were longer on these parts, but it is what it is. You do the best you can with the tools you have. With the front shell piece, I did some modifications to this. I trimmed it in some areas, and I'm gonna need to sand it to kind of smooth it out, but and then I heated it up and put a rubber band around it and then froze it because it was a lot more flat before. So now it contours to the body better. The natural peg holes in it from where it connects to the back shell worked out perfectly in terms of spacing and size, frankly. I got these little magnets. I'll have a link to these below. These are neodymium rare earth magnets. They're really great in figure customization because they just, you know, you can get them even tinier than this. Basically, I drilled a hole here, stuck a magnet in there, glued a magnet there, and then that just goes on like that. And, you know, this also hinders articulation a bit, like his leg. See, he wants to ride up. But the nice thing is I could always slide this around. I mean, this is effectively almost another point of articulation because it can move around. So, you know, once I get him in a pose I want, I can readjust this. So next I'm going to figure out how I want to attach the back shell. Thankfully, I was able to preserve these pegs. As it is right now, this can just kind of slot right in there. So I'm thinking I'm just going to drill into the back here and just slot that in. I was really trying to figure out how was I going to cover up like the articulation and stuff in here, and having this rubber turtle body being able to slide right over that and be exactly what I needed to be is just perfect. But yeah, I mean, this is all in all working out pretty much how I was hoping, so I'm pleased with it. I'm gonna keep rocking with it. Doing some sculpting. So I sculpted some claws onto these feet. I added these little extra ones on the end because I thought it would be kind of a cool, you know, turtles have more than 2 toes. And I know that that's the Ninja Turtle design, right? Because it's like ninja shoes, but I wanted to add a little something to both cover the pinhole that was here and then also, you know, make it a little bit more animalistic. So I also sculpted some claws onto the hands here. And then I'm also working on the head. This is kind of an in-between stage here. Hardens after about an hour, so I need to wait for it to dry so I can start adding more. But so far I've got the general shape of the head. There's going to be more of a beak on him. I used this tool exclusively, just this tip. You know, I've been using this tool for years. I love this thing. It's pretty versatile. And I just kind of put some scaling in there. And then I did the eyes. Now these are just BBs. You know, I have a thing, little ball bearings that kind of use for like a BB gun. They're really great for eyes. You know, I did all of this off camera, obviously, because it's just really difficult to do something at this scale and this level of detail while you're talking and have a camera in the way, especially when it's time sensitive clay. So yeah, just wanted to give that check in. I'm gonna do a little bit more work on this before it dries and then come back to it with more. Just wanted to show what the final head sculpt looked like. I sculpted this turtleneck type of texture on the back here, so that's gonna help it blend into that neck piece. But I painted it gray. I did that so that it'll have some depth when I add the green on it. Also just to make sure there were no like bad issues I needed to fix. But yeah, it's looking pretty good. You know, the nice thing about a sculpt like this is that it doesn't need to be perfect, because it's not like sculpting a human head where flaws are really, really obvious, because here it's meant to have multiple planes of texture and things like that because there's scales and whatnot. So yeah, this is ready for paint. I'm really excited to get this going. And it's really starting to come together. I'm really excited. This is my favorite part, when things start to kind of coalesce. I still have a lot of painting to do. I need to kind of lighten up, do some dry brushing underneath that's a little bit lighter, similar to how I've done some highlighting on the head here. I need to attach the head to the neck. Right now it's not. Got the head painted. The front shell is painted, and I'm very pleased with how it turned out. This is what it looked like before. You can see the difference there. I had to trim parts of it, obviously, to make it fit better on this body, but then also just did a complete painting. I also had to remove the Made in China letters on it. The back shell is attached, so I hit it with a little bit of a black primer spray paint just to remove like how glossy it was. Gonna get this all painted up next, but it is attached via a hole in the back and then the pegs that were in it already. This bottom one just kind of sits in the rubber here, and then the top one slots in and it's in there. So next I need to do wraps for it. So I want to do wraps for the forearms, wraps for the legs, and then I'm going to use some of this red microfiber that I have. So that's going to get tied on there nice and tight. And I'm going to try to articulate it with wire in the back part. Yeah, going to keep going, nearing the finish line here. I would check in here as I'm painting the shell. So I painted it all brown and then went in with this kind of goldish yellow color and did these different patterns. I try to keep it pretty symmetrical. Turtle shells are pretty incredible, just like from a visual standpoint. Like, it's pretty amazing that nature does that. But anyway, so yeah, now I'm going and outlining the stuff with black, and then once this is done, this is going to get a gloss coat, and I may actually use some varnish instead. I was going to use clear spray paint, but I may use some varnish and like a bristly brush and just drag it across, because turtle shells have this kind of like texture to them. And so I think building up some of that clear varnish with brush strokes will sort of emulate that. So I think that's going to be the move. And here's Raphael in all of his finished glory, and I think this is one of the coolest things I've ever made. I'm really stoked on this. You know, it turned out how I envisioned. As I mentioned at the outset of this video, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to pull this off, but you know, I stuck with it, and thankfully it didn't give me too much back talk. So this is really enjoyable overall. It was a lot of work, but it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. It was just very, very time consuming, and I'm really stoked with the silhouette that he cuts. I'm really excited at like the shape of him and just the kind of general like stance that he has. You know, these are pretty bulky arms and legs, and I wasn't sure how they were gonna translate into a figure that they weren't designed for, but I think it's a pretty
solid look. I do want to do the rest of the turtles. I'm gonna have to find the time, but I'm curious to see what other kind of bodies I can play with, because I do like it when the turtles have different silhouettes and they're not all just like exactly the same as each other. A couple details that I didn't go over in the build. So the weapons are from the 6" Plus Ninja, because these, I wanted them to be a little bit different, and I like the shape of these quite a bit. And they have the brown handles, so it was pretty perfect. The belt I made off camera is just a strip of that pleather with a couple little strips. And I made little rivets out of just like a thin piece of like a rod shape of plastic that I have from some accessory from a figure. I just cut into little discs and then used chrome marker on them. Not sure what the buckle's from, but it worked perfectly. Like, it was the perfect size, perfect shape, perfect color. So very, very stoked on that. Now, as you'll see, I opted to put the shell over the belt. Reason being is it just would not stay up. It wouldn't stay on if it were on the outside, and it would just kind of look wonky and weird. My reasoning behind that is I was kind of thinking, okay, well, the way that a turtle's shell attaches to a turtle, like, you know, there's a little bit of wiggle room underneath, and so, you know, ostensibly he just pulled the belt up underneath where the shell attaches to the rest of the body. And yeah, I think it just looks better on him that way. Yeah, I'm really proud of the shell on this too. I did the clear coat varnish I was talking about, and it came out too shiny. So I ended up taking a matte clear coat spray to it, and that dulled it down just enough. Let's change up the angle and take a closer look at the figure.
All right, here's Raph more up close with much less glare. I'm really happy with the way that the eyes turned out and the way that they're kind of like shadowed by the mask and the brow. That's really something that I was hoping to achieve with this. The way I did it is I stretched it over his face, and then I marked out where the eyes would be. I cut a dip here a bit, and then I used some double stick tape and I put it underneath so that it would really hold to the form. And then I used double stick tape on the inside and folded it on itself, and then glued it shut right here. And then I took a separate strip of this material and again double stick tape, and I folded it onto itself with some jewelry wire inside, and then I tied a knot with it and glued it to the back here. So the result is that this does articulate. So if I want him to look like, you know, it's blown in the wind, I can do that. You know, when you're working at this scale, a lot of times you get some kind of like little frayed edges, but I think it actually works for a Ninja Turtle because, you know, like they live in the sewer and all their stuff is like found. And so if their stuff isn't in perfect shape, that makes more sense, I think. The knee pads I took from that Playmates movie turtle. And initially I wasn't sure if I was going to do knee pads, but I thought you got to have them. And so I put them on here. I used some of that pleather to make a strap. That way it's like a free floating thing, so he still retains his articulation. Now, this figure, like the limbs on this thing were already really tough to move. So this thing does retain all of the articulation that it initially came with. It's just always been difficult with this figure. But it does have double jointed knee. You know, the toes still have articulation. The way that the foot mounts, it's on a swivel right here. So you can actually move it to the side like that. Probably the best articulation on this figure is in the shoulders. They have a very wide range. You know, the only issue is that the shell gets in the way. But I talked about that earlier too. That's just kind of one of the issues with the turtle. You just kind of have to accept that, like, it's not going to be able to do everything that like a Mafex Spider-Man can do. But it does still retain the elbow articulation as well. It's a bit hindered by just the tightness of the soft goods on here. But again, you know, if you have like Mezco figures, you're used to that kind of thing with certain ones. So probably one of the coolest things is that it has articulated fingers. So each of these moves individually, so you can make it, you know, grip the weapon or just be an open hand. So no need for alternate hands. And then I really wanted to disguise the articulation, so I did an extra piece of wrap around the wrist joint so it can still move around, but you just don't see the cut. Yeah, and then he still has a really decent amount of tilt. A lot of that does come from the hips, but you know, he has it in the torso as well. So some of the best articulation on this guy is in the head. So, you know, he's got full, 360 swivel. You can tilt him back, tilt him forward, tilt him side to side. Reason being, I don't know what torso this was, but it's got a pretty sizable like opening here. It doesn't have like traps like a lot of these figures where, you know, it makes a neck hole and then hinders the movement. So on this guy, you got a full range. Yeah, all in all, like, it's pretty well articulated given what it is. Really, you don't see any seam lines at all on this guy except for between the fingers and then like the neck, but even that is pretty well blended in. I made the sort of turtleneck piece come up, and it gets kind of bisected by the mask, but it actually is like a pretty nice fade up to green, so it matches with the rubber, and then it kind of changes as it goes up. Yeah, and then this rubber piece just unifying everything underneath worked really well. Yeah, I'm really pleased with this. Very happy with how this shell turned out. As I mentioned, this was a very meticulous paint job, as you can see, and then using that clear varnish with the brush stroke direction really did help give it kind of that turtle shell quality. It might not pick up super well on camera, but to the naked eye it's very obvious. And then this turtle has a tail. That's something that they did away with, you know, in the cartoon and the toys, because I think they didn't want it to look like something else. But and then I did put a clear varnish over the eyes too, so they have some shine to them. And you know, when I look at this, I realized I did a Ninja Turtles comic book cover for IDW some years ago, and I'll put it up on the screen here. It actually kind of resembles this Raphael. So I guess I've had a pretty consistent idea of what I want the turtles to look like, you know, in my head for a long time. So yeah, you know, the only thing is I wanted to put more weapons on him. I wanted to do like some throwing stars and some kunai and stuff, but I just don't really have anywhere to put them. You know, I don't want to deviate too much from the classic turtle design. I think when you do that, you end up kind of losing what makes them look really like a Ninja Turtle. I definitely wanted it to be like kind of the images we're used to from the comics and some of the cartoons and whatnot, without going too far afield. Like that's, you know, my major beef with the Platinum Dunes Michael Bay versions is like they just had like garbage on them. It was cool, like in theory, but I think, you know, when you take away from the amount of green that you see, it just, they tend to look less like themselves. I may put like a leg strap with some throwing knives on it. I think that could be kind of cool. I really want to do Leonardo. I almost made this Leonardo. He's my second favorite turtle, but I was like, nah, I gotta do Raph. He's always been my guy. So that is going to do it for this video. I want to thank you all so much for watching. I invite you to click the like button and hit subscribe and join me as I make cool stuff. I custom figures, dioramas, vehicles to go with the figures. I review new stuff that I get on the channel. If you're looking for other ways to support this, I've got t-shirts available. My Head on Swivel shirt, as well as several other action figure and comic book themed shirts, are available in my Redbubble shop. If you've never used Redbubble, it's pretty great. You pick the color shirt, the style, and the design you want, and they ship it right to you. Now, if you're not a t-shirt person, but you like comics, I've got several comics and graphic novels available, namely my books High Crimes, Count, and Retroactive. High Crimes is kind of Breaking Bad meets Cliffhanger. Retroactive is like James Bond meets Groundhog Day, and Count is my sci-fi reimagining of the Count of Monte Cristo. Think kind of a, you know, John Wick meets Batman meets Zorro. It's a cool story with swashbuckling action and sword fights and vehicle chases, and it's about redemption, revenge, and revolution. So those are all available at your local comic shop, bookstore, or at the links in the description below. So to everyone who's picked up a shirt already or one of my books, thank you so much. Like, it means the absolute world to me, and I really appreciate it. It really helps make it so that I can do this kind of stuff and bring you more videos. Couldn't ask for anything more, so thank you. So that is going to do it for this one. Until next time, keep your head on swivel.